Hi, I'm Alvin Pasaoa,
Hello, my name is Kevin Jefferies.
and this is the 635 Podcast. The 635 Podcast is about local politics, economics, and social and cultural issues in the Alvin Community College area. The views expressed on the show are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of Alvin Community College. Welcome to the 635 Podcast, and I am here today with Kevin Jefferies. Kevin, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about the recent elections, the results for the additions, the 13 additions to the Texas Constitution, and that will be plenty.
So this is from the most recent election.
Today is November 14th, and this would have concluded 1 week ago, November 7th, and there was a 2-week early voting period prior to that. So, yes.
Okay, and so a bunch of amendments were up. Now, tell me, before we dive into the actual amendments, tell me about the mechanics behind how they how this is done. Is this just by popular vote, like referendums, or I guess people are voting on, do we want this added to the Constitution?
Well, the process begins when the legislature meets, which it did earlier this year. This is an odd-numbered year. So when people voted in 2024, they voted for individuals in the Texas House and the Texas Senate to meet beginning this January. I think it was January 10th, and then they meet for 140 days after that. And during that period of time, there are propositions to change the Texas Constitution. The reason is because some of the things that people would like to do are prohibited by the current Texas Constitution. So in order to make those things happen, you have to change the Constitution. And there are other sorts of issues related to it. But that's the simple story. And these are introduced in the forms of joint resolutions. In other words, it's not a law, but you require a 2/3 vote in the House, 2/3 vote in the Senate. The governor does not have to sign, and then it goes to the population, the eligible population, for a simple majority vote. And if you get a simple majority vote, then you change the Constitution. Now, generally, and this is the situation we'll see with some of these things, depending upon how in depth we can get with some of them. You have a piece of legislation that's already passed, but it can't be enforced because it violates the Constitution or there's a constitutional restriction on it. So the simple story there is if you want it to be implemented, just change the Constitution.
Okay, so the process then was the two chambers, right, had to do 2/3. And then it had to be supported by the governor.
No, the governor doesn't play a role.
Oh, wow.
No.
Okay.
Well, a 2/3 vote would be veto-proof anyway.
Okay.
But he doesn't play a role.
Okay. Oh,
Doesn't have to sign it.
I guess that makes sense. That would be redundant.
Yeah, that's what makes these resolutions. So it's one of the ways that the legislature can check the powers of the governor.
Now, and then once they get the 2/3 vote on these different amendments they want to make, then it goes up for popular vote?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. So
every odd year you will have regularly, sometimes as few as 5 or 6, sometimes as many as 25, 26. That will be presented to the general population in the first Tuesday of November. So
so it goes up to vote, and of course, if the public doesn't support these, then that's it.
Pass.
It's dead.
One of these was not passed. 14 were given to the public for a vote, and 13 passed. One did not. The one that would have extended the age where someone can be elected to the courts, the maximum age from 75 to 79. That was defeated.
Okay. And so how many amendments were up?
14 were up. 1 failed. 13 passed.
Okay, so is that compared to past? What would they call them? Referendums? What's the
They
term
call
for
them
this?
propositions. I kind of have a issue with that because maybe it's because it's a shorter thing to say, but it's proposed amendments to the Texas Constitution.
Does
when you just say proposition, you're not really sure exactly what it is that you're voting for.
Okay, and does this pretty much happen every odd year?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
There are places where you can go. This is very well documented. we're not going to look necessarily at that stuff right now, but we can at some point, where you can go back to the first, let's say the first Congress that met after the ratification of the 1876 Constitution. Right away, we were changing it up. In fact, if you look, there's information that takes you to all of the elections for all of the past proposed amendments. And only one time did the legislature not pass proposed amendments to the Constitution.
When was that?
That was, I think it was the second time the legislature met. Now, the first legislature that met under the current 1876 Constitution, I think was like the 14th or 15th or 16th. I can't recall off the top of my head. But previously it met under the Constitution of the Republic of Texas and the 1845 Constitution, when Texas was an American state before it tried to join the rebellion. Okay. So after 1876. And there was also, 1866 and 1869, there were also constitutions, so the legislature would have met under those rules, but this would be a different type of set of rules.
So there this time around 14 proposed amendments. How does that rate compared to like the typical election? Is that 14 a high number?
It's about in the middle. Sometimes you've had a small number, sometimes you've had a large number.
Okay.
But it's about in the middle. Now, you will have something on the order of 150 or 200 proposed amendments, and these were the ones that made the cut. And sometimes you'll see that a particular amendment might be offered several times. One of the ones I was, following, which had also been introduced in the previous legislature, and I don't know if it had before that, was for funding for the Texas Brain Institute, which doesn't exist yet.
Uh-huh.
But it's like people that want to get a little bit more. It seems like, brain science, neural pathways, all the ways the brains work. Maybe it relates to research on Alzheimer's or whatever, aging issues, mental issues. That seems to be something that's kind of picking up steam right now. This would, just like the Cancer Prevention Research Institute of Texas, this was something was added, funding for it was added to the Constitution about 2005, I think, originally. It would be something similar, so money would be made available for research regarding the brain.
Okay, so here I'm getting kind of confused, like, does any expenditure of money require a change to the Constitution, or
No.
Okay, so then what is the purpose of having funding in the Constitution as opposed to just the regular course of lawmaking?
Because a particular area of funding may not be authorized. I'll give you an example. You have these dedicated funds that can be created, and 4 of these were established, brand new ones, and one was renamed. I guess one of the more noteworthy ones was here, let me look at it real quick. Scrolling down a little bit. This is a current proposed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me know what you're looking at. Let me see if I can find that.
I am looking right now at if you look at Propositions 5, 6, 7, and 8, they all have to do with what you're referring to, funds. If we look at 8, this is brand new.
Wait, are these even numbered? I'm looking at I'm looking at analyses. Are you looking at the analyses?
Yes.
Or are you looking?
Yes. Scroll down a little bit. There's
what date? Wait, don't turn this around.
I'm trying to help you out.
Oh, okay. There's different years. How far down are you scrolling?
Oh, I don't know.
What are you looking at? What's the name of it?
I'm in page 1V.
What is the name of the bold Constitutional Amendment election of November 2, 1999?
Where are you? I don't know where you are. I'm saying, excuse the camera. Let me look. All right. No. Here.
Oh, great. Wait. Let's see.
Click.
So, view list of constitutional amendment election dates.
Let's see. Yeah, hit this.
Which one? See list
the
of
second one.
The second view reports.
Yeah.
That's where I was just
that.
at. Okay, so let me open up that. That's it. These are the reports.
Yeah. Analyses of proposed constitutional amendments, right there.
Analysis.
See where it's here. This.
Oh, okay. So I go to this November. All right.
Yeah.
And then
because
I go
that's when the
to
election was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had to navigate one more. Okay.
All
right.
Scroll down. Scroll. Keep scrolling.
Okay.
Keep scrolling.
Oh, wait.
Is this the same one? Well, it doesn't matter. Here. Scroll up. Scroll up. See proposition. Scroll down. 8. Look for 8.
Okay.
All right.
Proposition 8.
And I'm just using that as an example.
All right.
It's between
All right.
7 and 9.
All right.
That's how you can find it.
Okay.
We might be in different things, but it's okay. It takes us to the same.
Proposition 8. You want me to click on that?
Well, not now. You don't have to right now. We can kind of look at these things because, again, to answer your question about funding, you know, you've already got, like, say, a general revenue fund and things like that that allow for funding for things that have already been accepted in the Constitution. And this is one thing that is important to understand. If we go back to the 1876 Constitution, there are all sorts of restrictions on what the state can spend money on because the people who wrote the 1876 Constitution wanted that. Over the past 150 years, whatever it's been, you have seen more opportunity, or let's say changes in the Constitution, to allow funding for a variety of different sorts of purposes. And you can, you know, look at the past analyses to try to get into, okay, what were the pros and cons for, you know, the funding that created the Economic Stabilization Fund and all the rest of this. So this is just the latest round of this. But the Proposition 8, I mean, to pull one of these out, it says the constitutional amendment creating the Broadband Infrastructure Fund to expand high-speed broadcast access and assist in the financing of connectivity projects. Now, obviously, this deals with the state trying to fill in the gaps that exist with broadband access. You know, there are big places in Texas. Broadband access isn't an issue here. Well, it was about 15, 20, 25 years ago. But, you know, you get out to West Texas, you get to South Texas, you know, it becomes a little bit more of an issue. And, of course, that can be, you know, impede economic development in those places as well, too. So here is a brand new fund dedicated to this particular purpose. And if you look at the one just ahead of it, Proposition 7, this is quite current. You're also creating a dedicated fund, the Texas Energy Fund, to support the construction, maintenance, modernization, and operation of electric generating facilities for the obvious reason.
Okay.
Because, you know, that's the stuff that you're pumping into the grid and hopefully ends up in the house, regardless of what the temperature is, if it's really cold or really high. But that's one of the major things that you see with these constitutional amendments.
All right, so let me put this into context then. So, all right, let me give you what I'm interpreting, and you let me know if this is right. That any expenditure by the Texas government needs to be justified by something in the Constitution.
Yes.
And so the Constitution creates a category that says you are allowed to spend money on this. And then every once in a while the government will pass laws related to expenditures in that category, and it does not require a constitutional amendment because they've already have been given authorization to do that kind of spending.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, there can be a little bit of wiggle room if we wanted to take a sidebar at some point or sometime in the future and go into the different sources of funds, different types of funds. You have a general revenue fund, which can go from function to function. You know, the legislature has to go through a process of appropriating money, allowing for the drawing of money from the Treasury for particular sorts of purposes. But depending upon the source, there can be some flexibility. Now, these would not be flexible. The money in the energy fund would go for the construction and maintenance of modernization operation of electric generating facilities. Same thing with Proposition 8. If we look at, Proposition 6 with a Texas water fund. Now, this is interesting because we've had tons of these things. Water funds over the course of time in the state of Texas. It makes a lot of sense because we've got a lot of dry areas. This is something that helps assist with that. In other words, and there's a level of expertise I don't have right now when it comes to these sorts of things because we've had so many of them. I can't tell you the different purposes of different amendments that have passed at different periods of time. I think some of this stuff actually helps replenish funding for funds passed in previous years. That's the most I could say about that. But if you want to look at some of these other ones, I mean, Proposition 5, this is beneficial for the University of Houston system and the Texas Tech system and the Texas State system. It says the constitutional amendment relating to the Texas University Fund, which provides funding to certain institutions of higher education to achieve national prominence as major research universities and drive the state economy. My understanding is this, to some degree, replaces something called the Higher Education Fund. So it's not necessarily creating something new. It's renaming it, and it's also providing more revenue. And I'm sure I'm getting a few things wrong in terms of the detail. But this is to provide funding. It's not going to quite be on par with what the University of Texas system and the Texas A&M system gets from the Permanent University Fund, but it's supposed to head in that direction. Increase the number of top research and universities that we have in the state of Texas.
Okay.
And if you want to scroll to the bottom, there's at least one other one. Yeah, Proposition 14. The constitutional amendment providing for the creation of the Centennial Parks Conservation Fund to be used for the creation and improvement of state parks. We don't have the same level of state parks that you have in other places. I bet California is full of them. And that obviously can provide for tourism economy and whatnot, visiting different areas within the state. And so this is supposed to enhance that.
I see. Okay. All right, so better parks. Let's do a quick run through. Okay, so let me go backwards. Proposition 14, we have funding for parks. Proposition 13, we got some age discrimination. Increase the mandatory age of retirement. That's interesting. First justices.
And remember, that was not accepted.
Oh, it was rejected.
That was the one that was rejected. I mentioned a while ago.
So this
most
is the
of
one.
These were passed.
Okay. Interesting.
With the exception of this one.
Okay. Any reason why?
Well, here's one of the things we can do.
Is it old people feeling bad, or
it
what?
could be getting more job opportunities for older folks? Just sit behind the bench there. If you scroll down, and this is the advantage of this this document we're looking at, and there's several different places within Texas government, the House, the Senate, and whatnot, that will give you different sorts of analyses from their perspective on these things. And they'll, if you read through it, I'm scrolling down right now to look at that particular one, Proposition 13, where it'll get into this. You'll see what the supporters are saying and what the opponents were saying about it. And I'm in one, let's see, page 67.
There should be a hyperlink, but
that.
it is not. What is it, page 67?
Yeah. I just keep scrolling to the bottom. And this is also where you can get a little bit of detail. Now, one of the criticisms of these things, and it could also be a criticism lodged against individuals who don't do their homework ahead of time. If you were just to walk in and look at the title of these things, you don't necessarily know exactly what you're voting for. And what you're voting for is language that is, obviously, since it's an amendment to the Texas Constitution, language that's inserted into the Texas Constitution. And in this case, it would have gone into Article 5 of the Texas Constitution, which creates the legislature, vests legislative power in a court system that it details. And all this would have done really was just to scratch out the number 75 and replace it with the number 79.
So they were raising the age of retirement. Was that it?
They don't call it retirement. What they say is that you can't get elected past the age of 75. That's the situation right now. So you could be elected at 74 and you turn 75 and then you can complete your term. And it could be a 4-year term or a 6-year term, depending upon what you were elected to. And this would have pushed it back to 79. One of the arguments against this was the idea that you're not going to have as much rotation in the judiciary. There were some partisan concerns that came out as well, too, regarding that. What I'm looking at here, and this is what's interesting because it was defeated. There was no opposition in the legislative process because, again, as bills, these are resolutions, but they go through that same kind of process. It'll go to a committee. People will come in and they'll argue in favor of it, argue against it. In this case, the comments by supporters, and this is in page 68, the top of 68, because people are living and working longer than in decades in the past, it's appropriate to allow judges and justices to serve beyond the current mandatory retirement age of 75. Increasing, that's the first one. Second, increasing the mandatory retirement age for judges and justices will allow experienced and competent public servants who are willing to continue to serve. 3, allowing judges and justices to serve longer could decrease turnover and ensure a more predictable and stable judicial system. And 4, since judges and justices in Texas are elected, any issues with the performance of a particular judge or justice can be addressed by the electorate. So, and no opponents.
Exactly. That looks kind of funny. No opposition.
Which makes the opposition curious. I think the idea, too, that, that again, you're allowing judges to just stay in place, and also, there's partisan control of the judiciary in the state of Texas, and there were some concerns that this was going to, by some folks, not everyone, but by some folks, that this was going to exacerbate that control. How that built up, I don't know. That would be an interesting research topic right there. So you don't have any kind of internal opposition to this, but certainly it picked up on the outside. And it was about a 2/3 to 1/3 vote against this.
Interesting. Let's keep going. Proposition 12, the constitutional amendment providing for the abolition of the office of county treasurer in Galveston. That is very specific.
That is a very specific thing, but there's a reason for it. And actually, if you want to tie this in with Proposition 11, which also has to do with a county. In this case, it's El Paso County. I'm scrolling up a little bit. I think I'm finding it. The constitutional amendment authorizing the legislature to permit conservation and reclamation districts in El Paso County to issue bonds supported by ad valorem taxes to fund the development and maintenance of parks and recreational facilities. So in a sense, it's similar to what we saw with those funds before. Discrete funds. The state of Texas is allowing El Paso County to go into debt to fund these conservation and reclamation districts, which would basically be, I don't know, apparently they're a little bit loose, but it would be sort of like what a drainage district and a municipal utility district and all these things would do separately. Counties can kind of organize these things as they choose. But here's the kicker. Counties are created in the Texas Constitution. There's a separate article for counties, and so if you want to change what counties are in fact actually doing, and it might require, in this case obviously it did, seemingly did, required a change in the Constitution. So that's why you had to go to the Texas Constitution to change this, and again, everybody in the state of Texas got to vote on what happens in El Paso County and Galveston County.
And that's really interesting. So let me see if I could understand this issue. So maybe this means that counties can issue bonds for other reasons, right? Like
if it's approved by the Texas Constitution.
Okay, so like there are uses that are approved for counties to issue bonds for buildings and.
Yes, and we would have to dig into some of the specifics. Within I think it's Article 9. That is about counties, and there's also government code, local government code in the state of Texas that goes into this a little bit further. Mm-hmm. In other words, you might have some language that could be a little bit loose, and okay. I'm thinking about this in terms of the ability of Harris County. The voters approved 25 years ago creating the Harris County Sports Authority, which again collects taxes and uses it for, the stadiums and the sports teams and things like that too. I don't know if there was a specific edition. In fact, I don't think there was that dealt with sports necessarily, but it was loose enough to be able to fit within whatever was in fact actually approved, or already existed within the Constitution. In this case, it didn't.
But now I'm kind of wondering, why is El Paso able to borrow for maintenance of parks and recreational facilities? Why not say all counties can do this?
They might. I don't know. I mean, because there could be some sort of limitation with El Paso right now. That's a great question. And actually, here, if we
so
we can read through this. There are answers.
Oh, wait,
there are answers.
All right, wait. Let's hold on. Let me do an overview of the rest of these. So, okay, that's interesting. So there's probably some backstory to why
right
El Paso.
Here it says background and detailed analysis. Constitutional amendment proposed by this provides specific authority to the legislature regarding parks and recreational facilities developed by conservation and reclamation districts in El Paso County. The legislature's general authority to create conservation and reclamation districts is granted in Section 59, Article 16 of the Texas Constitution. That's where you have auxiliary provisions. Provides that the conservation and development of natural resources and the development of parks and recreational facilities are public rights and duties, and further requires the legislature to pass laws appropriate to achieve those goals. It also contains provisions authorizing the incursion of debt and the imposition of taxes by conservation and reclamation districts. And this is part of it, too. The original Texas Constitution was very negative about any kind of debt. So what they're actually allowing here is to go beyond what was originally not allowed in the Constitution. But to go a little bit further, in 2003, voters approved a constitutional amendment to resolve issues surrounding the development and financing of parks and recreational facilities by conservation and reclamation districts. So presumably this is what kind of opened up opportunity for these. Before the 2003 amendment, it was unclear whether a conservation and reclamation district could use property taxes and issue bonds supported by property taxes to pay for the development and maintenance of parks and recreational facilities. Remember, we're at ACC, and that's how we're able to improve our buildings. We built the S building and all that with bonds issued supported by property taxes. Now, but again, that's established that community colleges and independent school districts can do that sort of thing. Can conservation and reclamation districts do it?
Okay, wait. What exactly does it mean to say a bond is supported by property taxes?
Well, when you're issuing a bond, of course, it has to be paid.
Yeah.
And you have revenue bonds, and you also have, general purpose bonds, I believe it is. Now, meaning that the bond has to be paid off at some point. And the question is going to be, how is it going to be paid off? A revenue bond means that whatever the use of that particular facility is going to generate revenue that can pay it off. Well, what if I don't know that a park can do that. We paid off the S building with health and science and nursing and all that because of all the tuition and the use and whatnot. But it could be that some things are just general bonds, and they're paid by things like property taxes.
This is interesting because my conception of I don't know anything about sort of local government bonds. I mean, the way I think about bonds, both like commercial bonds and federal bonds issued by the United States government, is that they need to borrow money, so they issue bonds, and whoever wants to buy those bonds, anyone around the world can buy a bond, which will essentially pay back interest. So it doesn't even have to be a U.S. taxpayer who helps fund the United States debt. It could be somebody in England buying U.S. bonds, and then they're the ones who are helping pay for those expenses.
Anybody who wants to park some money someplace safe.
But when we have a bond supported by property taxes, it's property taxes that are used to buy those bonds? Is that what that means?
To pay them off. Yeah, that's what it means to say that they're supported by property taxes. And again, you might say that, well, what's the purpose behind this? Well, you're talking about parks and recreational facilities. These are just sort of things that, ideally make life more pleasant, in a municipal area. If you have a public park, you're not paying money to get into it. Anyway.
Okay. Let's go further in. El Paso, the number 10. No, wait. Okay, number 10 is, what is this? A lot of payments for ad valorem taxation, equipment or inventory held by a manufacturer of medical and biomedical products.
This is interesting. And there was something similar, 2 or 3 legislative sessions ago, having to do with minimizing the tax burden of oil field suppliers, pipelines, and things like that. When the county is coming in, of course, the basics of property taxes is that the county is going to come in, they're going to evaluate property, and then you will have taxes from the different local governments, the independent school district, the community college, the city, the county, whatever. They're going to assess a tax rate. An elected board will assess a tax rate that will be applied to that value, and then you will collect the appropriate amount of money from the homeowner or whatever. Now, it could be a personal home, it can be a business. In this case, we're talking about a business, and we're talking about efforts to try to minimize how much is paid in property taxes, which of course has been a pretty constant theme in recent decades. But what this does, and let's read through it. All right, so it's a constitutional amendment, and it deals with, I think it's Article 8, which deals with taxation and revenue, authorizing local governments to collect property taxes, ad valorem taxes to the value, authorize the legislature to exempt from ad valorem taxation, authorize, not requiring the legislature. You can do this if you choose to do it. equipment or inventory held by a manufacturer or medical or
Okay.
biomedical products to protect the Texas healthcare network and strengthen our medical supply chain.
So this is a tax cut, basically.
Effectively, but it's not so much a tax cut as it is it is at the end of the day a reduction in taxes, but not because you've cut taxes. You've reduced what it takes to, in fact, actually evaluate property. So it's my understanding here, it would be just be the building and the land. It would not be the let's say the what does it say? The equipment to make this stuff or the inventory.
Oh
that you're
God,
holding on.
I didn't even bother to think about that. Whether in terms of evaluating property, is it the stuff that's on it counts as okay, the equipment on it. All right, and
Yeah.
then okay, that kind of that makes sense. Also, they're reducing a disincentive for high value industries to move into Texas because
Yeah.
they have like
Yeah,
expensive
exactly.
equipment and they're going to get
Yeah.
taxed really high. But why single out this medical stuff? Any
I
idea?
think it was easier to pass if you simply singled this out. Now, again, as I mentioned before, you saw something similar with pipelines, or I shouldn't say pipelines, but pipes, things like that, things that were related to the midstream, in oil,
Yeah.
you're actually transporting the oil through pipes, so people are producing that. We're not too far from places that do that. But apparently what was restricted was how much inventory was being held in a particular period of time. In other words, you could hold it for something like, I don't know, 6 months. I don't know but that's I just made that up.
Now, this makes me wonder what kind of deal, if any, did Tesla get? Any idea of a car
do they do medical or
manufacturing?
biomedical product? I don't know. I mean, we could look that up, but
Like in the past, I mean, I would think that somebody would say, if Tesla wants to build a factory here, or they wouldn't want to be taxed for the value of their factory.
What would you focus on? Let's say that they wanted to build one of their battery factories.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What's your inventory of batteries? What's the equipment that you're using to make these things? This obviously focuses on a particular industry. And I found it curious, and we were talking about this in class also, because one of the things the Texas Medical Center is trying to do is get more into biomedical research, biomedical engineering. There was apparently a big chunk of land that was purchased south of NRG and all that, the South Loop, similar to the size of the Texas Medical Center, but they want to focus that on manufacturing. Remember, we're running out of masks and whatnot during the pandemic. So we're not producing them in the United States, and so they're like, well, there's opportunity right there. I mean, the governor and I think the mayor of Houston were all at the medical center where they were kind of showcasing some of these new things coming up. But this would go along with that as well.
Okay, so medical supply chain. So let's help the supply chain. Okay.
Also points out something about, if you look through the Texas Constitution, you see all these little nuggets here and there that benefit a particular sort of industry. And again, why not do this broadly? I think the broader you do it, the more opposition you might get. If you can kind of narrowly tailor to it.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to say, all businesses, we get to exempt from, that would be a massive tax cut.
Yeah.
Okay. So, maybe medical field is more strategic, both in terms of we want to secure medical supplies, but also we have certain areas we want to incentivize, a healthcare system.
But again, what kind of tax breaks is Tesla working out right now with the state of Texas? Now, remember, that's a different thing than saying they might be working out tax breaks in a local area, property taxes and whatnot. Now, of course, that would relate to this as well. Because when you're talking about ad valorem taxes, remember that the state of Texas can't collect property taxes. It can set the rules for the collection of property taxes by local government. So that plays.
That is an interesting point. So let me clarify. The state of Texas itself does not have a property tax.
It cannot. In the Constitution, it says you can't collect a property tax. But of course, if Texas wants to, all you have to do is change the Constitution.
What about the sales tax? Is that
sales tax is a state thing, as it is a local thing as well too.
Okay. Wow, all these intricacies. That's good. Okay, so as a teacher, I see Proposition 9. What was our cost of living adjustment?
Oh, I don't even know.
Probably not much, but okay.
This is actually not for teachers. This would be for people that are getting TRS. It's all right. The constitutional amendment authorizing the 88th legislature to provide a cost of living adjustment to certain annuitants of the teacher retirement system of Texas. Well, the TRS, you know that.
What is an annuitant, though?
People that are receiving the annuity. So if you took TRS, do you take ORP or TRS?
TRS.
Okay, well this will be you.
So this relates to the cost of living that they receive. Okay.
You'll receive an annuity, and this would be adjusted to cost of living, which it isn't right now apparently. Now, but notice the language right here.
Gives them authorizes them.
Authorizes the 88th legislature, which is already met. Now again, the governor keeps calling it in for special sessions for. The education savings accounts, the vouchers, whatever you want to call them. But the 88th legislature has already passed this. But it can't be enforced because the Constitution, up until last Tuesday, did not allow it. But now it does.
Yes. I see. All right, 8. We got to speed up. Constitutional Amendment, Proposition 8, broadband.
We mentioned that a second ago.
Okay.
This simply gets Texas in the business of funding broadband statewide, and you can kind of read between the lines in those areas where the private sector has no incentive to do so, because you're going to lose money.
Yeah, so not in Dickinson, because I guess apparently, who's our guys? Frontier has opened up offering fiber optic, but this is for out in West Texas and places where there's not many suppliers.
Not much of anything.
All right, number 7, we got constitutional amendment providing for the creation of Texas Energy Fund to support the construction, maintenance, modernization, and operation of electric generator. Okay.
One of the ways to deal with the grid.
All right, so this is supporting the grid. Okay, so that's good. Proposition 6, Texas Water Fund. Okay, is Texas, part of Texas, still in drought? Is that what's incentivized this?
I believe so, but I don't know. I mean, we didn't have a major drought this summer. I mean, it felt like I think we've had worse ones recently. But we're always, if we're not in drought, we're close to one.
Okay.
So this deals with the Texas Water Development Board, which is an executive agency that oversees, obviously the development of water retention projects and things like that, trying to figure out how to preserve the water that we have, expand if that's possible. But again, that requires a lot of water. And there's a lot in the Texas Constitution dealing with funding for water projects.
Okay. And then we already talked about the university funds. So let me see, higher education, major research. So more funding for research universities.
And what it's doing here specifically is that it's changing the flow. I don't think you have necessarily new money that's coming in, but the flow is going to be changed a bit. Now I'm reading a little bit through the analysis. Proposed amendment provides for a dedicated source of revenue for the Texas University Fund from the interest, income, dividends, and investment earnings attributable to the State Economic Stabilization Fund established under Section 49G, Article 3, Texas Constitution, also known as the Rainy Day Fund. So some of the funds and this was an argument against it actually, some of the funds for the Texas University Fund, some of the monies are redirected from the Rainy Day Fund.
Oh, okay.
It's not just that, but that's part of it. And some of the language, if we had more time just to dedicate to this, we would see ways to try to get around the limits that are placed on the growth of the Texas budget, because this would increase that obviously in different sorts of ways, and different parts of the Constitution already forbid this, and so you have to change those parts of the Constitution to allow this to in fact be established.
Okay. Proposition 4, wow. Give me the Cliff Notes on this.
This is the one having another, it's relatively simple. Hold on, let me back up a little bit. So it's another property tax bill. And this kind of gets to the heart of the evaluations of different, hold on, I'm scrolling all the way up, to the top. The simple thing is that instead of you have a home that's worth $200,000, previously if your residence homestead, you can knock $40,000 off the value of it, and that's when you start to be the value is assessed by the county appraisal's office. Now that goes up to $100,000.
Oh, okay.
And that's the simple story here.
And so that amounts to a property tax cut.
It amounts to a property tax cut, yes.
Okay.
Now, it also amounts to a reduction in revenue for local governments. So that's part of the issue, too.
Okay.
And you're going to see a lot of issues with schools trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? How much less money are we going to be able to collect? Now, the argument on the other side is that, what can justify this is the fact that we've had such a tremendous increase in the value of homes recently.
Yeah.
So it could very well be at the end of the day that you don't have that reduction because the receipts increase.
That's probably the counter argument.
Yes.
Okay. Number 3, constitutional amendment prohibiting the imposition of an individual wealth or net worth tax, including a tax on the difference between assets and liabilities of a family or an individual. So no wealth. Texas says no wealth tax.
No wealth tax in the state of Texas. Now, last year, or I shouldn't say last year, 2 years ago, Texas put into the Texas Constitution something that previously was just a statutory limitation, meaning it was just in law, on what it took to create an income tax. Texas could, up until the last time the amendment was added, you could have an income tax if the voters would approve it. Now it's been put in the Constitution that you can't have an income tax. But again, the voters can come in later on and approve that. But I doubt that you would get 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate anytime soon to approve an income tax in the state of Texas. So I think that pretty much for the near future or the mid-future or the distant future puts an income tax beyond what's feasible in the state of Texas. And this does the same thing with a wealth tax.
Okay. Proposition 2, constitutional amendment authorizing a local option exemption from ad valorem taxation by county or municipality. And what does this mean?
Well, if I could do one thing real quick. One thing I'm not quite sure. With the wealth tax, I don't know what they mean by wealth. I mean, what makes somebody wealthy? I think that.
Well, that's always the trickiest thing, is because it's going to be largely unrealized gains. So it'll be,
but it could be whatever. It doesn't
could be
matter.
Stocks, but I think that's what they're talking about. Net worth.
Yes, but what level? So I guess any level. It doesn't matter. Anyway, all right. So getting to Proposition 2, the exemption.
Child care facilities.
Child care facilities, in the same sense that you had that one thing that was
oriented
towards biomedical facilities.
Biomedical, now child care.
And again, it's an option. There's a local option exemption from ad valorem taxation for this particular use of real property. If you're operating a child care facility, the local government, and again, it says county or municipality, and I guess that means that, if you're operating one here, in our neighborhood, it could be ACC, it could be Alvin Independent School District, it could be Brazoria County, it could be the city of Alvin or whatever. They can either reduce or completely eliminate your the taxes if you're operating a child care facility in your real property.
Okay, so all right. And then constitutional amendment protecting the right to engage in farming, ranching, timber production, horticulture, and wildlife management.
This is an addition to the Texas Bill of Rights, and it's an interesting thing if you put it like that. But again, keep in mind what the Constitution does. It makes things just a little bit more difficult to do. And one of the arguments against this was that this isn't really so much about protecting, mom and pop and their ability to be able to farm and whatnot. It makes it more difficult for counties, for cities to put regulations on farms and ranches, timber production that's done by large businesses. And this has been a theme in the state of Texas also. Through the state government, you've had a variety of different players making it more difficult for local governments to regulate them. And this is one of the ways you do it. So make it, this is a right. You're intruding on a right here.
I see. Okay. All right, 13 amendments to the Constitution in one failed attempt. One last assessment by you. In terms of politics, was this a contentious set of amendments, or was it? How does this rate to the typical level of contention for amendment propositions?
It was not contentious. I don't think there was anything here that really raised to the level of any kind of controversy. I'm trying to certainly not like 20 years ago when we had the amendment banning same-sex marriage in the state of Texas, which, by the way, is still in the Constitution. It just can't be
overridden. Yeah.
By national law, by that decision, by actually national case law, the Obergefell's decision. It's still in the Texas Constitution, meaning if that decision was reversed, then it could kick back in. It could be enforced again.
Okay.
But nothing like that. And, tort reform, when that happened, putting limits on damages for lawsuits involving malpractice and, damages because of, workplace explosions or whatever, that was quite controversial as well. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that rose to those levels recently, but I would say that this is more of your typical one, where any kind of potential controversies were relatively contained. Maybe that also answers your question. Why was that one effective tax break focused just on one particular industry, biomedical industry? Obviously trying to help, spur further growth there. That is a growth area. But the more narrow it is, maybe the assumption is that the less potential opposition you're going to get. So this was, I think, relatively calm.
Well, that's could be a good thing. So, all right, Kevin, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome,
and
Albert.
we'll see you again next time.
All right.